Everybody doing today? We're all super excited to talk about AIO and lots of entity work. I know Ruby and I are very excited, bursting at the seams. It might just be because we're seeing sunshine for the first time in what feels like a year. Speaking of which, not everyone is suffering from vitamin D deficiency. So why don't you throw in where you're joining from in the chat? We'd love to hear where you're all coming in from. Right, I'm seeing some coast-to-coast representation from Listowel all the way over to Vancouver. Ruby, when you say Michigan, my favorite mitten, what does that mean?
It refers to kind of the shape of the state. It's often kind of describing where you are. You're pointing to different places.
I had no idea. That's amazing.
Yeah. Although I'm sure your favorite mitten is still mitten.
I have a cat named Mitten, so yeah, that would be my favorite mitten. All right, let's get things started. So thank you everyone for joining yet another industry news and product update webinar. As I mentioned, Ruby and I are super excited to share a whole bunch of updates with you. So we're going to be covering the current state of AI search, which is ever evolving. I feel like we just kept adding slides in as more news was coming out. Then Ruby's also going to take us through updates to Google and schema.org. I will take you through some schema product updates, and then we'll close it out with the product roadmap and go over some resources we've created over the last quarter as well. So you know that Schema App loves to introduce its employees using a knowledge graph. And for those of you who don't know me, this is mine. So my name is Jasmine Drudge-Willson. I'm the product manager here at Schema App, and I am Canadian. And I'm also an alumni of the University of Guelph, where I worked on the Links project, which was a linked open data, like semantic web kind of project. And I helped the development of some of the ontologies there. So this is me kind of hanging out in my sweet spot. I love talking about the semantic web. And what I've done here is linked my ontologies entity to Wikipedia to disambiguate or make clear the fact that the ontologies I know about are the information science kind and not the philosophy kind, which has to do with like the essence of being. And I don't really know very much about that. But this is an example of us using entity linking to make it very clear what an entity is. And I am connected to a colleague who is Ruby. So Ruby, take it away.
Absolutely. So my name is Ruby Ross. I am sure some of you know me already as the Learning and Enablement CSM here at Schema App. So documentation, things in the knowledge base, I am your person. You're seeing that my nationality is Canadian, and I mention this because it can be a way that you could inference or guess which London I might be from. Though what I'm doing is I'm actually going to make that clear again by using that Wikidata disambiguation link. So we have that inferencing piece, but then we also have that clarification piece using external knowledge graphs. I'm going to dive into grounding us, as always, with our values. So Schema App's core values are to grow, and this is something that we want to do alongside you and within the organization. We have growth mindset. We want to be resourceful together. We consider ourselves one team, both within the organization and then partnering with you all. We consider ourselves an extension of your team. Finally, we're humble. And what I really want to reiterate here is that your success is our success. Your feedback is going to help us grow. Your collaboration is really meaningful for us. So the more feedback you can provide, positive or negative, we're always incredibly eager to hear it. Without further ado, though, let's jump into the industry updates. So huge news in March. Google and Microsoft both publicly said that they use Schema Markup for generative AI. Ryan Levering from Google called out the fact that specifically Schema Markup is computationally cheaper for extracting topics. And if you've been working with Jasmine and the product team on the Entity Hub, your ears might be perking up a little bit at the mention of topics, as they are kind of a key component of our entity work, connecting different groups of entities together in related topic groupings. as well. So this is a constant kind of discussion topic that comes up. So although Google's confirmed they use structured data, John Mueller actually kind of cheekily reiterated that schema markup alone isn't a ranking factor. And this is something that Google's been saying for some time now. You're seeing that this screenshot that Mueller shared recently is actually dating to 2018. So this is a continued statement that Google's making. However, in this, what we're also seeing is that structured data can help clarify the topics associated with a page. And so by providing that clarity to Google, by improving targeting, what we're able to do is help Google in their goal of optimizing relevant results and answers for users who might be exploring a particular topic or question. So it's not a direct ranking factor, but again, it can be a contributing factor as relevance comes to play. No matter what kind of focus we're talking about, it's really clear that structured data is critical for modern search features, whether we're talking about chatbots, whether we're talking about AI overviews. And on the topic of chatbots, I do want to wish a happy birthday to one of our favorite chatbots. Gemini was officially kind of released and launched last February when Bard rebranded to Gemini. Since its kind of appearance on the chatbot scene, Gemini has undergone some pretty significant updates. We touched actually on the launch of Gemini 2.0 during our last industry and product update webinar. A key differentiator with that release was actually the introduction of agentic AIO. So the ability for this chatbot to complete tasks on behalf of users. Also calling out the fact that Gemini can run natively within Google's suite of tools. So Sheets, Docs, other platforms within the Google ecosystem can run Gemini natively. Finally, I also want to call out the fact that Gemini 2.5 and Gemini 2.0, can natively run Google searches. So leaning on those results in the actual chatbot responses. Gemini 2.5 was actually released March 25th, so quite recently. Again, it's improving that agentic focus, and it's actually #1 in the LMA leaderboard. So the Arena leaderboard, it is top of the pops in that sector. And when we talk about Gemini, I always like to differentiate between Gemini, the powerful AI engine, sort of the technology that makes things run, versus AI overviews being the visual feature that we often see in the search. So related, but AI overview being kind of the example or visual application of that technology. So who is seeing AI overviews? Since March 5th, AIO can be shown to all users in the broad availability group. So the link on this slide actually lists all of the countries in that availability group where Google has rolled AIO out. And so for these countries, AIO is going to be shown or can be shown regardless of whether a user is logged in or what their age might be. Now, some European countries like Ireland, Italy, Switzerland, they are a little bit more restricted. So since about March 25th, AIO is available in those countries, but it's only being shown to logged in users who are above the age of 18. And I mentioned this kind of distinction because I want to highlight the fact that AIO, it's not a monolith. It's going to be shown and different audiences are going to be engaging with it differently. And I mentioned this because a lot of our partners will be operating in multiple countries. So kind of keeping track of how things are being experienced by different users is always something to keep mindful of. Now, what are those users seeing? There's so many variations, so many different things to see, but I do want to highlight 2 recent changes that are quite interesting. So first, AIO results will now sometimes contain links to other defined Google searches. And so what I mean by that, in this top screenshot here, what can happen is if I click on that Google Translate, that link down below underneath the 2006, I would actually be brought to the native translation widget within Google Search that sometimes appears at the top of the SERP. So there's evidence of this where users are kind of being encouraged to continue their exploration and learning journey actually within the Google SERP itself. And I use the term exploration really intentionally because exploration features, so sometimes known as people also ask or people also search, those are now also experiencing AIOs being nested within those features. Both of these kind of indicate that Google's really motivated to keep users remained on the SERP, continuing kind of their investigation and exploration of different questions and topics that they might have. Now, we can all kind of speculate on Google's motivations for this, but I think the most important thing to reflect on is how these features are going to impact your user behavior and the customer journey, kind of in contrast to that traditional approach where users might be doing the majority of their learning on your site or on a particular site. So really remaining within that ecosystem. Now, how can we optimize for AIO? Most important thing that I want to reiterate, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Continue to write useful content for humans. We really don't recommend dramatically or drastically changing your approach for AIO. Standard best practices for SEO really still apply. But some key kind of suggestions to explore. First, auditing your content and your brand. Jasmine's going to touch on some strategies to do this later on in this presentation by querying chatbots and using different future features of Entity Hub. Additionally, we really suggest incorporating questions and how-to keywords into your content, focusing on kind of titles, headings, and answering those questions within the first few sentences of a given post or a given section. And naturally kind of bookending those efforts by using schema markup and entity linking, making sure that the content is understood and that it's contextualized so that it can be shown to those relevant target audiences. Now, as much as it pains me to say, I do have some bad news. AIO data is still not available in Google Search Console. It's kind of the gist of it is really that AIO is changing so quickly that reporting on it is a challenge. Now, even though we can't report and measure this directly, we're always going to be creative, collaborating with you all to find ways to kind of do this obliquely or come around to and get that data. Our top 3 kind of groups of suggestions are as follows. So first, if you're using Google Analytics, you are able to track your process or track progress from within or from AIO. Additionally, using specific platforms like BrightEdge, Conductor, ZipTie, SEMrush, highly recommended. If you have access to any of those platforms, we actually highly recommend kind of this new process where if you're able to share that access with our CS team, again, highly recommended. We're happy to kind of collaborate with you to find new ways of reporting on AIO. Finally, and Jasmine's going to touch on this a little bit more, exploratory research, using those chatbots directly to ask questions about your brand, about your offerings, things of that nature. Now, we talk a lot about Google. The reason being is that it is still the leading kind of traditional search engine. You're seeing this in this breakdown of a pie graph. However, what I do want to call out here is that chatbots do have high quality traffic. So this is a kind of summary of a really in-depth analysis of a variety of different studies on chatbots. And the overall kind of pieces or key things that I want to highlight here is that the average duration for referral traffic from an AI chatbot is about 10 minutes, so slightly higher than the standard from Google. And they're going to be navigating, users are typically navigating to about 12 or so pages. So again, really high quality traffic, worth kind of keeping in mind. Although Google's key and kind of dominating the search market, continuing to focus on AI chatbots is definitely still recommended. Rich results continue to be a focus. Google is still making updates to rich results. The most recent change that we saw was actually new features being added to the event rich result. Things like being able to share an event, add it to your calendar, look for similar events. Again, we're getting into that kind of ecosystem connection piece, exploration, looking at similar events being kind of relevant. It can always impact user behavior. So you might see a slight reduction in clicks from your events, but also kind of keeping an open mind. How are users potentially engaging with this? Again, really meaningful to continue doing some exploration work in the SERPs. Last thing I'll touch on here is the introduction or the release of version 29 of schema.org. So there is a new type that's been launched, which is financial incentive with some related new properties. This is useful for calling out services or products that have a related incentive, and that can be government induced, but it also could be a particular promotion you might be putting on. Finally, shipping information was significantly updated, and we haven't seen any documentation updates in merchant listings, so it's only kind of appearing in schema.org, but I do want to call it the fact that Google actually was involved in raising this issue to make those improvements. So there's still active involvement within the schema.org community from Google, and that is really, really exciting to us, and just kind of something we're going to continue to keep our eyes on. But with all those updates, I'll actually hand it off to Jasmine to dive us into product updates.
All right. Thank you, Ruby. I also want to take a moment to revel in the fact that Google has just validated so many times over this past quarter how important structured data still is. It's a very nice, I told you so moment for some of us, I think. So we've been doing a lot of kind of like rethinking how we communicate the value of what structured data and schema markup is bringing to you. And our marketing team has put together this beautiful house, so like the schema house, which shows how schema markup is the foundation of the work that we are doing with you. We then augment this with the internal and external entity linking. So making sure that as a result, we're creating a super robust content knowledge graph, and it allows us to do lots of cool things. So you'll be already well acquainted with a lot of how it can support your SEO. So those clicks from rich results or traffic from non-branded queries and the kinds of things that your CSMs are surfacing in the business reviews that they're having with you. And with the advent of that was a big word to use and probably wasn't the right way to describe it, but with Entity Hubs kind of like more rolling out, we're also identifying really specific ways that it's able to support you with your content insights. So using this metadata, which is essentially cataloging all the content in your website to identify content opportunities. So it does support quality website traffic. It can support website conversions, but it's also giving you some really great information to support the content opportunity work. And we're currently also exploring ways that the data layer can be leveraged for AI innovation. So we're working with one of our clients right now who's looking at using the data layer to inform an internal search engine. So hopefully we'll have some exciting updates to share about that as that project moves along. And all of these three pillars all eventually end up supporting content optimization as well. So getting the right information in front of the right people at the right time. So to get back into what we've been focusing on the product side, as you may already well be aware, the Entity Hub's purpose is to help with the construction of a really high quality, reusable content knowledge graph to help optimize your content strategy. And we've got 4 jobs to be done here. So we're identifying the entities in your content, making it super descriptive, giving you the ability to manage those entities to increase the accuracy of them, and then reporting on their location, frequency, and coverage. So that's that great kind of like catalog of metadata about your content, bringing it all together with SEO metrics to also support you with some actionable insights to help optimize your content. And our engineering team has been hard at work over this last quarter, improving on the existing features and also getting some new ones out. So you'll notice that Entity Performance Analytics is currently in bold. So not quite available, but it's like this close. We're in the prototype phase right now, and it will be rolled out into production. We're expecting about midway through the quarter. We're just ironing out a couple other data pieces first. But what I want to kind of reflect back on for a moment is the data that actually makes all the rest of this stuff possible. And that is implemented through a process called entity linking. So this is the process of identifying the entities mentioned within your content and then connecting them to corresponding entities on the web. So these can be external entities. You'll notice in the image on this slide here, we've got the Jaguar car, and Jaguar has been identified as a brand that has also been defined as an entity in Wikipedia, Wikidata, and Google's own knowledge graph. But you'll also have internally defined entities that we'll be able to identify just by virtue of authoring your structured data using Schema Apps tools. So some really exciting improvements in the existing Entity Hub features. So within your entity reports, this is where you'll come once your external entity linking has been implemented to figure out what did we find and where did we find it. and it now contains clickable same as links. So same as is the property that we're using to connect the entities we found to those other identifiers in those other authoritative knowledge bases. So whether it's Wikipedia, Wikidata, and or Google's knowledge graph, it's kind of been a fun experiment to go in and explore what these links are taking you to. The Google knowledge graph identifiers in particular will actually take you to a URL that shows the knowledge panel that Google will provide for that entity. And occasionally AI overview responses will show up in relation to these identifiers as well. So it's really popping up in interesting places. And we've been having fun just kind of exploring how Google is representing some of these things. If you are making modifications to your entities, we've also added a statuses column. So this is just a flag for you when an entity has been edited, which is represented by a star, or if it has been blocked. And we'll eventually be rolling out a feature to allow you to filter for these things as well, just so that you can kind of zero in on historically what you have modified or removed. And if you are wanting to make edits to your entities, just to make sure that they're perfectly accurate, if you're noticing anything that needs to be changed, we've improved the Entity Manager toolbar. So some of the language wasn't super descriptive, but it couldn't be more descriptive now. If you want to edit your entity, you click the Edit Entity button. You want to undo your edits, you will click the Undo Edits button. And we have moved where you're able to block your entities. There's now a deployment toggle. Everything will be set to allowed by default, which means those entities will be deploying in your markup, but you have the option to block them from within this view as well, in case you're wanting to maybe just like further refine some of the entities that are deploying. So as Ruby had called out a couple of times, entity to brand correlation, you can do some fun things with the chatbots to kind of figure out how you are understood by them. So go into an incognito window, open up ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever your favorite chatbot is, and use prompts like, list 10 things that you associate with my organization, or list the products or services that you associate with my organization. And in this example that you can see, we've asked it about Schema Markup, obviously. And the list of concepts that it returned for us matches really closely with the top entities that have also been identified within our content. So for those of you who have like tens of thousands of entities that we've identified, if you're not really sure where to start in terms of beginning some analysis, this will give you like a shorter, more manageable list to start kind of tackling that and reviewing that data. We've also had many requests to be able to figure out how to capture these entity SEO metrics. So maybe you've got external entity linking recently added. You want to know the impact that it's having on your search performance. So you can figure this out by going into your entity reports. And then when you click the actions button related to an entity, it'll show you a full list of URLs where that entity has been identified. Click on that click to copy button and then go into our Schema Performance Analytics tool. You'll have to go to the page level reports, but you can paste this list of URLs in. So you're filtering for only the performance results for URLs where that entity was identified. You can add filters for specific queries. So maybe we're interested, for example, in like Schema Markup as an entity. So if I paste in the URLs where Schema Markup was identified, I can filter the query performance for things that contain schema, but maybe exclude app, so that I'm looking at more like non-branded kind of performance. So as you may have noticed from the number of steps that I just described, this is a convoluted process. Ruby actually has created really great documentation to kind of break down the steps to do this. But this is also why we have been working so hard on our Entity Performance Analytics dashboard. So this is a tool where you just go into it and then it tells you the performance data for your entities. It'll be a lot easier to interpret. So this will give you information around the entity coverage. So wherever you've added entity linking, it'll let you know how many web pages you got that added to. It'll give you some aggregated SEO performance as well. So probably a little hard to see on the slides because these are small, but it lists the name of each entity that we found and then aggregates the performance of the URLs where that entity was identified based on whatever date range has been added in your control panel. It gives you some information on entity performance over time. It also highlights performance anomalies, looking back over your historical data. And we've gotten some really fantastic feedback from some of the users that we've shown this to so far, which actually influenced some of the design decisions. And we can't wait to get this in front of you. So as I mentioned, should be about halfway through this quarter. We just want to make sure that the data in the process is in tip-top shape first. So we've been giving about 6 customers, I think, early access. I think some others of you, we've kind of just been like sneakily having meetings to get some additional feedback to gauge your interest in some of the things that we're working on. Some of the feedback we've gotten on entity performance analytics in particular has been, this is wonderful, My personal favorite, SEO is about to get lit. And then somebody identifying that the word clouds are a really helpful way to kind of communicate performance in a method for people who maybe aren't as involved in the technical SEO bit, right? So you just get a picture in front of them and we can immediately see from our own image, oh, hey, Google's one of the top performing ones. So this is going to be the next thing that we get out into production. We're also working on improving our internal entity linking feature. So we had rolled that out a bit ago, realized that we wanted to further refine some scaling and some accuracy stuff. And then once we've got that out, we'll be looking at topic clusters. So general availability of Entity Hub, we're aiming for July 1st. And if you're wanting more information about this, how to get access to it, how to get involved, just reach out to your CSM. They'll be more than happy to get you set up with that. We've also been working on a maintenance hub. So this is providing a page inspector. We've got a deployment monitoring process, which just tries to make sure that your structured data is deploying as expected to the URLs, not running into any issues. So this is something that the CSMs are managing right now, and they're going to be using this as part of their maintenance workflow, and it will eventually be made available to the rest of you as well. So we'll go over the product roadmap here real quick as well. So I always like to just kind of give you an idea of what we were talking about the last time we were all together, so in the last quarter. But this quarter, we have made some great progress in both of these areas. So the highlighter extension that we've been talking about for a very, very long time, the CSMs are all using it. And once they give it the okay, it's going to be put into general availability. So we're identifying some bugs that need to get resolved first. And once that is out, we'll get some advanced tags added into it. So if you're wanting to do things like add external entity linking to your own templates yourself, that will be something that you can do without having to rely on the CSM to do that work for you. This maintenance hub page inspector, so that was the last screenshot that I had just shown you. And once we get this data together, we'll also be working on a triage agent. So that will be notifying you when there are errors that actually should be getting addressed, either on the Schema app side or on your own side if there's some issues with accessing URLs. And when we're confident that this is looking good, we'll bring that into general availability as well. In terms of entity SEO, so as you know, this is all of the Entity Hub related work. So getting entity performance analytics out, that's the number one thing that we're working towards here. And then being able to provide additional data around the topic clusters, which will then provide topic analytics on top of the existing entity performance analytics. Getting that internal entity linking a tag into general availability will be the next step. And we're looking to replace our existing API for external entity linking as well with one that will be able to be customized to your content. So we're using something that's quite generic at this point in time, which means it's not always identifying entities in the way that you would like them to be identified. And we want to be able to give you the opportunity to kind of further enhance that. And lastly, we'll be working on giving entities entity homepages. This is still something that's kind of in the works though, so we will share additional information about that once we have it available. Lastly, back to Ruby for some information around new resources.
Absolutely. It has been a bumper crop this particular quarter. There's been a lot of content, really insightful content coming from the broader Schema app team. You may have heard me mention kind of that content optimization piece, navigating AI chatbots, AI overviews. There's some really great observations and learnings our team has had about optimizing for AIO. I won't go through the rest of this list. I do want to reiterate it will be shared as clickable links in the slides following that you'll be sent as a follow-up. So please feel free to dig into those. We're really eager to hear questions and insights that come our way. I also want to call out some of the upcoming events on the Schema app roster. First, I do want to call out the fact that there's another webinar that's going to be on May 22nd, kind of an Ask Us Anything on the subject of schema markup, knowledge graphs, entity SEO. Jasmine, who's on this call, will be a panelist, as well as Mark Van Berkel, our CTO, Kevin, who is a top-notch senior CSM here at Schema app, and then, of course, hosted by our CEO, Martha Van Berkel. The other thing that I want to call out on the events docket is that we will be at HMPS 2025. So Martha Van Berkel is going to be discussing with Carolina Anthony from Advent Health ways to future-proof for search. If you do swing by the conference, please definitely come by the booth and stand and enter your name for a chance to win a pair of AirPods. So do love that opportunity as well. Finally, I'll mention the fact that our training courses are free. They are available at training.schemaapp.com. You can follow them at your own pace, follow your own learning style, really eager to kind of see learning and questions that emerge from that as well. Finally, if you're interested in shaping kind of future iterations of Schema App's tools and platform, if you're interested in becoming a lead user, you're welcome to sign up following this link. Your insights could kind of drive and suggest different courses that these products can take, as well as getting beta access to some of these new features that we are talking about and discussing in our roadmap. And that brings us to the end of the webinar. If there are any questions, please feel free to toss them in the chat. We will either respond to them or send them as part of a follow-up email. But I just want to reiterate, thank you so much for joining us. This has become such a wonderful part of our quarter and something that Jasmine and I very much look forward to facilitating together.
How do you sign up for the Entity Hub trial? Reach out to your CSM. They will be able to give you the resources to get started, figure out what kind of desired outcomes you're wanting to drive, and then make sure that we're kind of like scheduling it appropriately as well, because some of the features that may be most helpful to you may be things that aren't out quite yet. So reach out to them and they'll be able to provide you with some more information.
Should content
Yeah,
be
this is a really
authored
good question.
differently? This is a great one. I would say generally, not necessarily differently. Again, it's that best practice of authoring for humans. The thing to kind of keep an eye out for is if you're looking to create content that's kind of investigative or informational in nature, really returning to those best practices of keywords that include questions or how to process content. I highly would recommend checking out that recent article on our site about optimizing for AIO and chatbots. Huge recommend.
All right, if that's it, thank you again so much for joining. Hopefully there's more time for discussion next time because maybe there'll be fewer AIO updates, but I doubt it. Thank you, everyone. Don't hesitate to reach out if you've got additional follow-up questions at support@schemaapp.com.